I don't just want to up and quit my shoot job and then not have anything locked down or secured for me. And then all of a sudden I'm floundering, trying and scrambling, trying to get things together in line.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Fresh, and stand back for another interview. You know who this is because she basically works everywhere in the wrestling media. If I was to say, in the words of Jeremy Lambert, blank, 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 no doubt she works for them. So I'm joined today by Ella J to discuss the transition to full-time wrestling media work. So welcome back on the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back. I still can't believe I think we last talked earlier this year. I know it was. I want to say like April, May. But
about
yeah, we've come a long way.
Yeah, about 6 months ago, I was looking at for research purposes. So if we take this back, I am curious to know.
Yeah, a lot has changed.
Obviously, yeah. I am curious to know, what did you want to do when you were younger for a career?
So when I was younger, I had a couple things when I was younger that I thought I wanted to do, but it wasn't really until middle school where I was really sold on the idea of something in the psychology world because, I had struggled with a lot of mental health and, I was very interested in learning about other people's minds. And I felt like I didn't want people to go through what I went through alone. So that was literally, I have it written down in a journal that I had when I was in middle school. I'm going to be like a psychologist or a counselor one day. And that's what I went to college for. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology and minored in creative writing. I always knew too that I wanted to write a fiction book or an autobiography or something. I enjoyed writing too. And I did that all throughout my whole life. And so I did that too kind of on the side. But I was more fixated on becoming a counselor. And then I literally enrolled in grad school, got accepted to a rehabilitation counseling program, and then didn't want to go into more debt. So I unenrolled, still worked in retail to sustain myself. I'm like, maybe I'll take a year or a semester off of college. And then I started my own podcast to keep myself busy. And then obviously that hobby from wrestling podcast is now gravitated towards to like an actual career of something that might actually be sustainable, which became sustainable for me now. So I've been doing that for a month now, full time.
You talked about a lot there about it being a hobby, first of all. And I am curious to know, because you put a tweet out recently basically saying, and I will butcher the tweet because I couldn't find it, I'm not going to lie. It basically saying, the things that have suffered since I've been doing full-time wrestling media work is like my personal wrestling podcasts. So what have you maybe put in place now so that you have time to do your personal projects when it comes to wrestling media?
Honestly, I'm still kind of trying to figure that out myself. I also kind of explained in that tweet that I will be reassessing my whole podcast, because before this became full time, I literally cranked out 95 episodes in 2020, 113 episodes last year in 2021. And then this year I think I'm going to end the year with about 50 this year. If I'm doing my math correctly, I'll end this year at about 50, plus or minus a few. But obviously, as you can see, that's gotten cut in half. And hold on, let me fix my camera real quick. That got cut in half because, I took on all these other projects, whereas a wrestling gal my baby was basically the main thing that I was doing for my first 2 years in wrestling media before all these opportunities kind of started up in 2021 with like SE Scoops, WrestleZone, Women's Wrestling Talk, etc., going on to where now it kind of fell on the back burner as I took on more freelance work that gets paid for. So for me, I do everything myself for my own podcast, like editing, researching, uploading, conducting the interview itself. And I kind of feel like I'm at a point where, I kind of, if I can get over being stubborn and maybe asking for help for an editor to upload it, I think I'm at a point where now I'm more financially stable and kind of comfortable enough to where I can actually take in help from people who have offered to help me with stuff and still be able to put out a good product, but just not uh be the one to do everything myself. I think I'm at a point where I can actually get some help to kind of reimagine that. And I still have to get a lot of stuff in order, and I'm kind of not rebranding it, but I have a new intro. I wrote a new what's it called, description of the podcast with everything. Everything evolves. A wrestling gal has definitely evolved, much like I have myself. So I'm kind of reimagining it and hopefully starting up with a schedule that I can maintain and feel confident in going forward is basically where I'm at right now.
So what are some of the things that people have maybe offered to help you with when it comes to a Wrestling Gal podcast? And then what is something that you're like, nope, don't want any help with this, like you'll never outsource, shall we say?
I've had a couple people. I also am very grateful that I've networked and integrated myself into this wrestling community where I've had like making graphics. I'm pretty good at I'm very basic with making graphics, but obviously graphic work, thumbnails are something that I'm trying to do. Making my own hosting reel is something that I've been so stubborn to make, although I know I can't make it myself because my video editing skills are very basic. I don't know how to do anything fancy. I'm pretty good at making a graphic with Canva anyway, but video editing, I'm very, very basic in that. And I've had people like willing to help me, but I'm also stubborn where I want to do it myself and but you get what you pay for though. And the editing I know that they make is great. It's just me trying to, I have the money now in order to be able to kind of bring in some help or outsource if I need it. I just need to get over me being stubborn. I don't think there's anything really where I'm like, the only thing where I maybe would say no or am kind of more like hesitant about is like I've thought about bringing on a co-host, but also like I like my style of how I do. I liked how I conduct my own like a wrestling gal is the place where I can kind of conduct the interviews however I want, however I see fit, because it's my own brand and my own podcast. Whereas sometimes if you're doing it for these other sites or for freelance work where it's not your platform, or if you're doing it for like a major company or something, you kind of have to hit on certain points or certain material. Whereas if it's my own podcast, I kind of have control and free reign over that. So there's nothing like I'm totally against. It's just I need to stop being stubborn, and I feel like I'm in a place where I can reach out for help, but part of me is still like stubborn. But I know that I want to create like a quality product and get into a consistent routine. I'm still in the planning stages right now, trying to work it around my schedule, which is obviously has a heavy load.
Yeah. So you brought up your schedule there. So what if we break down your week? And this could be the rest of the interview, I'm not gonna lie. But like what sites are you working for when, sort of thing?
So my writing is the only thing that's like consistent. My writing shifts because I write for 3 different sites, that being SE Scoops, WrestleZone, and Wrestling Inc., the newest one. In between everything else is where I'm scheduling interviews, editing, I do commentary, I do weekly news for Women's Wrestling Talk, sometimes podcast appearances, research and prepping stuff. It honestly changes week to week to where on the low end, if I had no interviews, my schedule alone just with my writing would be 60 hours. So it ranges from 60 to 70 hours depending how many interviews, podcast appearances, etc. I have, but at the bare minimum is 60 hours a week, between my weekly weekly commitments with Women's Wrestling Talk, where we host a news show, and then writing between the 3 sites. Plus I also do Raw and SmackDown coverage every week for SE Scoops. So that is everything that stays the same every week unless I'm traveling for some reason. But that doesn't even include any interviews that I have. That changes week to week. So it changes week to week, to be honest.
Is that something you enjoy, like the change of the wrestling business, or is there a part of you that's like, I wish I had some more consistency?
I will say like I'm very the brunt of my schedule is very consistent because like I said, most of it, like 60 hours of that 70 is between writing and plus my once a week
Hmm.
thing with women's wrestling talk, right? So I have solid hours that I made up myself of every day work at this block of time, this block of time. That stays consistent. So for the most part, it's consistent, but in terms of scheduling interviews, it varies every week because I have to work around my schedule and the guest schedule, or if I have a co-host for that show, we have to work around that. But for the most part, all my writing stuff and like live coverage on Raw and SmackDown has been very consistent. It's just filling in those spaces each week
Hmm.
with other outside projects. For the most part, honestly, it's consistent. And I've gotten into a little bit of a routine now. Now I'm forced to be a morning person though. So that I'm still getting used to though.
Hmm. So you brought up there being forced to be a morning person. So how has maybe your routine changed since you went into full-time wrestling media work?
You before like if it was up to me because you have to understand too, before I was working in retail for what we call my shoot job day job, to where my
Hmm.
schedule would change every week. Some days I would have to be up at 6:30, 7 o'clock to go into work. Other days maybe I didn't work till 3 or 4 o'clock. Now it's at the earliest I start at 8 o'clock, and that's if I don't have any morning interviews. The earliest I would be starting would be 8, 9, or 10 a.m., depending on the day, except for Saturdays, which is my one day off, which even I fill a lot of the time anyways with stuff. So it's been hard to adjust because I have not been a morning person since I was basically forced to in like high school, when you had to be up for the bus early and stuff.
Yeah.
In college, I never, after my first semester freshman year, I never scheduled a class earlier than 10 a.m. because I valued my sleep. And if it was up to me, I would be sleeping until 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. every single day. But now I've slowly become like a morning person, and like just get up now at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock with kind of no problem, although I'm still super tired, but now it's becoming more of a habit. And I know in probably a couple other months I'll just be waking up at 9 a.m. on my days off, even just because I'm so used to it.
Hmm. So what are some other habits that maybe you've changed from your shoot job that since you've now gone into full-time wrestling media work?
um I'm still like crucially organized because I have to be with doing so many things. I don't know if it's changed, but I'm definitely more cognizant of like triple checking my schedule. Like I literally have a whiteboard over here. I have it on paper and I also have it on my phone and in a notebook to keep
Hmm.
track of everything, because or else I would just miss something. So I think I'm just becoming more aware and cognizant of my schedule because I hate missing stuff. Obviously,
Yeah.
we all have those momentary lapses where something just slips your mind. So I'm really trying to get into the schedule of that. Other than that, it's just being home all the time now, as to where before I would be out half the time. It's just I don't go out a lot, but I've also had to sacrifice kind of a social life too, to where I work from home a majority of the time, actually all the time I work from home. So it's also kind of sacrificing a social life too. I've definitely have found is definitely one of the biggest changes.
What have you put in place then, since you talked about sacrificing the social life, to enable yourself to be like, right, Ella, this is the end of the workday? Like, have you put anything in place to be like, to help you switch off, basically?
Honestly, honestly, sometimes if I'm just super tired, I am just like, oh, I could just wake up early the next day. Or I will multitask with doing stuff where because sometimes our friends like to do like video chat, like calls, like between like, and we have like virtual game nights and stuff.
Hmm.
So I still allot at least like one day a week or at least one time a week where, like I'm FaceTiming one of my friends, or I'll hang out with somebody every other week, or we'll all jump on like virtual Zoom, or I'm texting people constantly.
Hmm.
But I don't think I have a system set in place. I definitely have those moments where I'm like I need to take a break, and I'll have like little mini dance breaks in between work that I enjoy doing with my headphones. So I definitely take breaks. That is the one thing that I do to keep myself sane. I do take breaks, I will say that. Whether it's watching YouTube or listening to music or checking in with friends. I don't know if I have a official system though set in place.
What of okay? What advice would you give someone that, like yourself, is now adjusting to full-time wrestling media work? What is a mistake that maybe you made in the beginning, or something you wish someone had told you in the beginning of your full-time journey that you're like, do this, it will make it a lot better for you?
I still think I'm like figuring stuff out myself, to be honest with you. I feel like if you ask me maybe 6 months down the line now, where I still am navigating stuff and am still trying to get everything figured out. But I will say I was very lucky that before I transitioned, I reached out to a couple of people like Denise Salcedo, who gave me good advice on locking down my schedule ahead of time. So you kind of can get that consistency locked in. And people have given me good advice going into this, but for myself, I still like I'm kind of in the stages. Like I said, it's only been a month, so I feel like I'm still kind of in those stages of figuring things out for myself and making those mistakes and learning from them, um definitely trying to get better of not getting burnt out with everything, as I know a lot of people can attest to. my
Yeah,
work my work life basically is almost my entire life right now, so I'm still trying to find that balance, so don't get I haven't gotten terribly burnt out yet, but I know at some point everybody does, right?
definitely. You talked about being burned out there from the work perspective, but how has your wrestling fandom changed since now you have to cover Raw and SmackDown for a site, etc.? How has the way you watch those shows changed? How has the way you maybe watch wrestling changed since your full time transition?
I think it makes me pay closer attention because, to be honest, before I was even doing like wrestling media, I would be gone half the time and have to miss all the shows because I was working at my shoot job. So I would have to get caught up via my timeline, or I would get home so late or just before it started and I'm just tired and then just didn't watch the product. So kind of not being forced to, but getting like paid to cover it, has made me pay closer attention and actually kind of rejuvenated my love for it again, as to where
Yeah,
before I would be so tired, or, I'm like, oh, I don't feel like watching this tonight. I'm so tired. But now, like, I have a motivation to do it, whether it's covering about it, writing about it, interviewing, asking questions about it. I feel like it kind of rejuvenated my love, or at least I definitely pay more attention than I was before. So I think not that like I have a deeper appreciation for it, but I just pay more attention now, if that makes sense.
totally. So, what is some things that maybe you notice on the shows now that maybe you weren't noticing
Mm.
before when you were just watching it? I don't want to say casually because that sounds disrespectful, but you know what I mean.
It kind of was though, like at a point, like to be honest, I had not watched like Raw or SmackDown or like NXT in a long, long time. Like besides the pay-per-views that me and my friends would get together for, I would literally just follow along through my Twitter timeline or then just read the results afterwards. So, or I would just watch it on YouTube. So I didn't get to watch anything live unless it was occasional pay-per-views, like for a long time, to be honest. Like especially after Mania, I really didn't watch much live, to be honest. And then everything when I was, even if I got to watch the next day, I was at like work or something, and then days go by and it's like there's no point in watching it now. It's like a week old.
Yeah,
Um, but I think more of the stories too that like I've been paying attention to, because I like the small details, of like, oh, this thing doesn't make sense like chronologically, and like the storytelling with things, I think I've been able to pick up on a little bit better. But otherwise, honestly, I don't know if I've noticed much just because I've been watching more. That doesn't make sense. Something that I don't know how to explain it, but I think I've definitely just been paying more attention to like the stories and all of that. And granted, yes, I still don't watch everything because there's so much wrestling and I have to maintain some sanity, you know. But
Yeah.
luckily, we always have the Twitter timeline there, or people literally write results up on it, live coverage for it, or there's YouTube too and stuff.
Did you just say something positive about Twitter? Wow.
You know, that I mean, I know it's kind of like it's uncertain. It's in uncertainty right now, but Twitter is the platform that I use the most and is the way that I have communicated or networked with so many people in the wrestling business that are now like great friends of mine. And we got connected through Twitter. So I will say, yeah, it's definitely the uncertainty right now with all, you know, the Elon Musk stuff going on and the IWC just in general. But for the most part, like I either don't follow a lot of those people or I just mute them.
Mm.
I keep myself in a circle where, you know, I trust the people and I like genuinely like the people. Or if I don't, you know, the mute button just exists.
That is very true. So with the transition to full-time media and it changing your fandom, what is a show now that you talked about not really watching the shows? What is a show that you're not currently watching that you're like, I wish I had some time in my schedule to check this out?
It's gonna sound really sad because considering like my girl is there. But Impact Wrestling, you know,
Mm.
I work Thursday evenings, so I can't really watch it live, you know. Although I do watch NXT live when I work Tuesday nights because I'm also be covering news on it. But also it's sometimes hard to multitask between watching and then also trying to write stories at the same time. So I don't get to watch Impact Wrestling as much live, or I'll watch it like the next day to keep up on the product. That's one that I think a lot of people are sleeping on, and they have a lot of good stuff going on right now. So that's definitely one that I think in general though is slept on, that a lot of people like. I was just at Bound for Glory last month and it was a great weekend, great product. So that's one that I've been missing seeing live, but to keep my sanity, I'm either working or to keep my sanity, I'm just not able to watch them the whole every single
No.
show.
You did talk about a lot there, keeping your sanity. So, what is something we talked a bit about work life balance, but what is some things that in the future you're looking to put into place to hopefully maintain that work life balance a bit more?
Um, you know, I think it's just realizing like I'm really trying to not take on more than I can chew. I've gotten better at saying no to stuff or not loading up my week crazily. So I've had to say no to a couple of things, or I'm like, you know, we can revisit it because frankly, I just keep saying yes to everything for the longest time to where it would be filling up my schedule. And even on my day off, you know, it would be filled with something on Saturdays. And so I think I've gotten better at saying no to stuff, or at least saying no for now, that to hold off for my own like mental
Mm.
sanity and not overloading myself, because like I said, I tend to fill a lot of those free time with other things, whether it be interviews or editing or whatever, you know, to get caught up with stuff. So I think getting better that you don't have to say yes to everything. It's great that people think of you, but you also got to keep in mind like your mental health and your sanity and not get burnt out. So I think I'm slowly getting better at that, but that's something I definitely am still kind of maneuvering around.
Are you one of those people? You strike me as someone that's like, you're like, I've got a free 10 minutes. I do not know what to do with myself. If you're bored, are you one of those people that doesn't know what to do with themselves?
Sometimes, yeah, I just, you know what I do a lot of the times where I don't know, I just go on Twitter and then read about more wrestling, you know,
Mm.
and I don't know, it's just, you know, or I'll just like go on YouTube. But a lot of the times, yeah, I just sit there and you know, I even if I have free time, I'll do something that's like work related a lot of the time, you know. So I do at moments like find myself occupying my time, like watching YouTube or like playing games or something on my phone, but most of the time it's even when it's my free time, I'll literally be reading stuff that's work related.
Mm. You talked about reading stuff that's work related. Who are some of the current writers in the wrestling sphere that you're think people are maybe sleeping on or need to check out? But then also, who is a site that now that you're free time, you're like, I'd love the opportunity to work with them a bit more.
I think, one person who is kind of in like a same situation as me. He doesn't do a lot of he does some interviews occasionally, but most of his work has been writing. Like he literally wrote a whole book on women's wrestling this year. I think it was Women's Wrestling. That's Colby Applegate, who works for two of the same sites that I do. He works for Wrestling Inc. and WrestleZone, but he also writes for Diva Dirt. And so we have a lot of crossover there where we work for two of the same sites. And, I see him all the time on my timeline, but I think he's a phenomenal writer. And he's also one where I've seen has days where you're working for two different sites within the day. And I'm like, you know what, Colby, we don't talk a lot, but I see his work and I notice it. And I'm like, we're pretty similar. And so he has a deep appreciation too for women's wrestling, which is something that obviously I'm often associated with and have kind of built up to be my niche or my brand. So he's definitely one that I think more people need to be paying attention to. I think he's probably having another book come out next year, but don't I have to fact check that.
Don't quote you on that, basically.
Yeah, don't quote. That's the word I'm looking for. So check him out. He is absolutely phenomenal. I've only ever had good interactions with him, Colby Applegate. You know what? I'm also, I feel like I'm also at a point where I'm still just trying to enjoy the stuff I'm looking for now. But I will say one of my goals next year is definitely to be on Quizlemania. That is something I have not been able to do yet.
How has that not happened yet?
Listen, I don't know. I have a lot of people that I am friends with that are on the show, but it's also not been something I've like nudged them about. I feel like I've finally sustained my big goal, which was making this full time. But I'm also like kind of now giving the nudge to people, I don't think Adam Blompied even knows who I am, but Sean Ross Sapp knows me, Denise knows me, a lot of people on there know me. Alex, Queen of the Ring, I'm good friends with, but that's something where I'm like, hey, that's one of my goals for next year. Now that I've accomplished like my massive goal, I think it's just, what's next? What do I want next? I know that's definitely something that I want to cross off and participate in if I can.
What was we haven't really talked about this, but what was the moment that you were like, okay, I can do wrestling full time now?
So for me, obviously this has been something I've been like shouting to the rooftops for like a year and a half, 2 years almost. I think for me, I've been wanting to make this jump for the longest time, but there was two things that I needed to feel confident to make that transition, and that was consistency and financial stability too, because I don't just want to up and quit my shoot job and then not have anything locked down or secured for me, and then all of a sudden I'm floundering trying to get things together in line. So for me, I needed something to kind of be that anchor for that. And then I just so happened I've been searching Indeed.com every couple of weeks, typing in wrestling. The one week I happened to type in wrestling, and then a writing position opened at Wrestling Inc. They were hiring. I didn't even see their tweet initially. I found it through Indeed. And so that for me was where I was like, I can make my own schedule. It's consistency. It's financially stable, and it's freelance. So I'm able to still do a lot of the stuff I'm doing now and not be only exclusively locked into one thing, kind of like a free agent, in professional wrestling as it would be. So that for me was kind of what sold me. I can make my hours, make a schedule however I want, which I was able to do, and then still do everything else I'm doing and make those more of a consistent schedule too. So for me, Wrestling Inc. has kind of been the catalyst as to why I made the jump. It was consistent hours, consistent. Not that everything's about pay, but for me, I don't just want to be floundering too, I said. So I got the consistency down. I got the financial stability down with all the freelance stuff I'm doing combined. And so that's when I felt confident enough to make that jump and officially make wrestling media full time.
You talked about there being a free agent in wrestling media almost because of your freelance work. So do you have a desire to work for one site exclusively? And then what could any site pitch you to get you exclusively?
I think I'm at a point right now where I kind of like being able to work in different places because I kind of sometimes have different roles at different places. And for me, one of the biggest things that I learned is like making yourself not only kind of accessible, but making yourself versatile too, to where now most of my work is writing, which is something I was more so involved in like interviewing and podcasting. Now I'm getting to have more experience in writing more consistently in like the news style and journalism because I don't have a degree in that. I took a couple like communication and journalism courses in college, but I don't have a degree in that. So I've been learning everything basically on the fly the
Mm.
last 3 years. I don't have a degree in like any of this. And so for me, it's focusing myself on being more versatile in wrestling. I feel like, I've gotten like interviewing down, I've gotten more comfortable on it, and people have told me that they see that I've definitely improved and gotten more confident. So I feel like I've gotten that down. I'm also still working on like getting more comfortable with commentary that I do for Capital Championship Wrestling. I've only been doing that for almost a year now, it'll be. So, but again, we only do that like once a month. So it's still getting used to that and making yourself versatile to where people will want you not just for one thing, but they might think of you for, a writing or hosting or interviewing or maybe future
Yeah.
commentary opportunities. So for me, I kind of just want to be more well rounded and kind of, explore all the different aspects of wrestling besides the actual wrestling itself.
No desire
So
to get in the ring then?
no, for me, no, I suffer from vertigo.
Ah,
So I have a lot of vertigo, not a lot of, but occasional vertigo spells that which can last anywhere for like, half hour to like days. So for me, it would just not be worth it. And I don't remember which wrestler. Might
Kenny
have
had
been
vertigo
Kenny
for like a
Omega.
year.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it was Kenny Omega that I
Yeah.
actually just found out about recently, and only because I was writing a thing about him, actually suffered from it. And I'm like, how did you do that and wrestle at the same time? I just can't even. I know how sick I get from it. So for me, like they randomly come on, or if I like move, I just couldn't do it. Um, so for me, I've kind of ruled that out. I wouldn't say never, but it's kind of not a priority for me. So I've just been kind of make myself well rounded or at least open to exploring everything that's, not the physical part of wrestling.
Fair enough. So, with your work with Capital Wrestling, what is your like routine on show days? Like, how do you get into the zone to do commentary? And then, more importantly, how do you come out of the zone to decompress after an event?
So I'm very lucky that actually me and the co-commentator Alyssa Marino do it remotely. So we don't travel to the shows. We don't do it live. We actually get the
Oh,
tape and already have the results like after the fact. So we normally film it within the week after. And luckily I was paired with somebody who was very well seasoned in commentary, broadcasting. Used to work in NXT as a backstage correspondent. She's been working with Women's Wrestling Army, Shine. She's basically a seasoned vet. So I'm very fortunate that I've been able to kind of, lean on her to guide me. And she has a lot of connections to these girls and knows how to gather notes needed for the show. So for me, I've just been lucky that I've been able to kind of bounce off of her and like ask her for advice and naturally integrate myself. But up until very recently, like every time I would be so nervous to where, you just get so nervous, you feel like you're going to throw up or you're going to pee every 10 minutes, like just to be real. But
yeah.
this last month was the first time ever where I was actually like kind of calm and felt a little bit more confident beforehand. And at that point, I've probably been doing commentary for like 9 months. So granted, we only do it once a month, so I've probably only done commentary about maybe 10 times now. But I've just been very lucky that I have somebody like Alyssa Marino to bounce off of and learn from and kind of decompress after. I feel like it's with anything when you're doing anything for like the first time or anything you don't feel confident in, you get that sigh of relief. And then you're also self-critical, but I've learned that
Oh,
it
I'll be
takes
like that
time.
tomorrow,
Yeah,
editing this back
it
massively.
takes it takes time to learn things, with anything you have to get the reps in order to be good, which is also something I'm doing with my writing. And well, also each site I write for has like different styles of wrestling, different systems they use. So I'm still adjusting to that too. But with anything to get good, you have to get practice, right?
Definitely. So you talked about there working for different sites, they might have different styles when it comes to writing and interviewing. So how does that work? Are you, when it comes to interviews, first of all, are you like told these are the beats you've got to hit, like etc. And then with the writing, is it a similar sort of thing?
So with the writing, on my board, I literally have like written down, like, and they use all different like systems of how you collect stories, you know, what system you use to write it. So I have it all written down. Luckily, too, for one of them, they have like a whole style guide that you can always look to and reference at any point. So for me, it's also kind of being cognizant of sometimes I have to go back my past work just for like little bitty things like grammar or like punctuation and all of that, you know, they all have like a different style. So for me, it's just like cognizantly, I have some notes in there of the differences between each that I can reference at any point. I've been writing for SC Scoops though and WrestleZone for a while now, but
Mm.
the Wrestling Inc. has a different one than the other two, which is more AP style. So which is something I was not really familiar with. Luckily though, there's a style guide for AP style. So I've been able to reference that and still get used to it. But sometimes I catch myself, you know, doing a little tweet, doing a little thing here that actually goes there. You know, it doesn't go in this one piece, it goes in the other site. So it's just being more cognizant. And I have notes up in notebooks of stuff. As for interviewing, I don't know. I feel like it depends too. Sometimes I feel like too a lot of it depends on how much time you get, you know, like some people, I mean, if it's like an AEW or like an Impact interview where you get maybe 15-20 minutes max, that's also something you have to be cognizant of, where you also have to hit certain points to promote like the product too. For me, I feel like when I have kind of free reign, I kind of like to connect deeper with people. And I don't know, I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of just adjusting to the point of the interview, whether it's to promote something or it's for like my column that I'm writing, you know, for women's, like a women's wrestling wrap up. I've been doing more interviews for WrestleZone now, where not only is it the column, but we also have a featured interview almost every week with the women's wrestler where we'll talk about women's wrestling or anything related to them. Or, you know, they have a weekly watch list like feature
Mm.
that I cover for that. Whereas like if it's my own podcast, I don't know, it just depends on like the point of the interview too, you know?
Mm. Talking about interviewing, as we look at wrapping this up, I am going to be selfish for 5 minutes and just be like, where can I improve? What did you enjoy about the interview, etc.
I mean, you had good questions for me. I don't know. I'm also curious to know, did you have like your questions like sorted out ahead of time like I do? Or for me, it seemed more like spontaneous. And if you were looking off to, I didn't even see you look off to the
I
side if it
was, as
was,
it happened.
yeah,
So
that, yeah.
the way my phone is set up, I've literally got it leaning against
Hmm.
so my iPod case, and every so often I'll just literally go, have I covered this? And then I'll do a mental check and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
See, I didn't even notice that. For me, I also kind of have the same thing. Well, obviously not now because I'm not interviewing, but I'll have like a split screen of all my questions to the side to where though, like, I didn't even notice that you had them like thoroughly prepared. It looked like spontaneous to me. But obviously you had them prepared kind of in disguise, which is something I'm trying to get better at and not like noticeably looking over to the side. But you know, that's just something so trivial and so minuscule that I don't
Yeah,
think people even notice really, or it takes away from it. That's just something I know I'm trying to like get better at is like, you know, is sometimes I structure my stuff too much
mm,
and like getting better at going with the flow, but you went with the flow really well with the conversation. Obviously, I brought up some things that you elaborated on, which is also something good that I try to do sometimes if somebody says something that maybe, you know, isn't scheduled or planned in there, but also being open to elaborating and going with the flow of the conversation, which I think you did well.
I really appreciate that. Any uh, any improvements I will take genuinely, like because
I think the only improvement, I mean, for all of us is, you know, getting that stable Wi-Fi. Even I have trouble
yeah,
sometime.
yeah,
like my sometimes it'll just be wonky, because I don't have an Ethernet cable, and sometimes like Spectrum, I don't here I have Spectrum cable, and it just goes out sometimes. That's really the only thing. But again, we don't really have full control of that like
No,
ever all the time.
literally, it's like I'm in the back of my house, and it's like everyone else is on Wi-Fi, and I
Yeah.
can't be a dick and be like, I need to use the Wi-Fi. F off, basically.
Yeah.
I physically couldn't do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get that. I wish I had. I'm also upstairs in my room to where if I were to put an Ethernet cable, I would have to do it somehow down all the way down the stairs. It's just not practical.
Yeah, it's just not. But before this conversation really goes off the rails, as we look at wrapping this up, Ella, we're going to do a very quick segment. I don't know if you remember from last time, called Generic Questions. But this time, as this interview is going to air in early 2023, I'm going to ask you your favorite match of 2022, your favorite pay per view of 2022,
Oh.
your favorite theme song of 2022, your favorite tag team of 2022, your favorite superstar wrestler of 2022, and your favorite wrestling moment of 2022.
Okay.
So, what's your favorite match of 2022? I said
Um,
2022, far too much there.
and you still got it all in one. I would have been like 2020. I wouldn't have made it. I think for me, like the most definitely like emotionally charged that I felt like really also translated over well and like selfishly, was Hard to Kill, with Deanna Prazo versus Mickey James in the Texas death match. Mickey, I
Mm.
don't think had like ever done a death match. I think it might have been Deanna's first too as well, but that was definitely at the peak of, Mickey had overcome so much, had finally dethroned the Virtuosa, who had basically been champion for like over 300 days at that point, to climb that mountaintop after being released from WWE, then having Empower and having her run. And also to be the first knockouts to main event a tenfold pay-per-view for Impact Wrestling was huge. It was also just a great match too between the two. So for me, it would be that, but also Bianca and Becky at WrestleMania
Mm.
was also really, really good too.
Both really good choices, in my opinion. Favorite pay per view of 2022?
Pay-per-view. Mm. You know what? Honestly, like WrestleMania was fun, but honestly, like I feel like because I was at SummerSlam, but also Impact Bound for Glory was really,
I
really
think
good
I'm going to
too.
make Ella's head explode.
Impact Bound for Glory, I will say, besides like the winner of the Call Your Shot Gauntlet, for me was really good. There was a lot of good matchups on that card. Maybe because I was there, but I feel like it's an underrated one. So I'm gonna go with Impact Bound for Glory.
I think this entire conversation, apart from obviously turning your fandom into a career, is basically Impact is underrated. I think will be something I'll be adding into the title on this.
Okay.
Uh, favorite theme song of 2022?
Hmm. They changed his theme song. I would say Metalingus Edge, but like they changed his theme song. Like, he came out to the Brood's theme song one time, then he changed it ahead of WrestleMania. They changed Alexa's.
Mm,
Hmm. I think I still technically like I have to go with my favorite of all time, I think. My favorite of all time is MVP's I'm Coming, He still came out
really?
to it technically.
Wow.
Yes. I know it's not like, and then they also
One,
took
it's
off.
a deep cut we don't get very often.
It
So
is. Exactly. So you know what? I'm gonna stick with technically, he went out to it a couple times. So MVP I'm Coming.
fair. Favorite tag team of 2022?
um Usos have been great. I'm trying to think if there's any other tag teams. Hmm. I would say the Street Profits, I do enjoy them, but they haven't been. I mean, they did have a couple title matches. I do enjoy them, but I feel like it has to be the Usos, right?
Mm.
Because obviously now, as of today, the day of recording this, they're the longest reigning WWE Tag Team Champions
Mm.
of all time, ever, period. And I feel like they have been such an integral role to the bloodline, especially when Roman isn't there all the time. They basically have been, they've been anchoring down the bloodline in Roman's absence. So it has to be the Usos.
Mm. Favorite wrestling. Oh, should we do you two? Should we do favorite wrestling moment or favorite wrestler of 2022?
Both. For me, selfishly, Mickey James entering the 2022 Women's Royal Rumble. When I tell you, when that news first broke, I think it was like January 8th or something, very early January. I had so many people blowing up my phone. I was at work that day, so I was working till 10 o'clock. They announced it during Raw. I completely, was it Raw or SmackDown? They did it somewhere, but I completely missed it. And I had people blowing up my phone, and I still couldn't believe it that WWE was working with Impact Wrestling, for the Women's Royal Rumble. And then the reception she got when she came out to her own song, Hardcore Country, with the Impact Knockouts Championship. I feel like that is one of the most genuine and biggest pops like this year, maybe ever, period. So for me, that was definitely a good moment of the year anyway.
And then favorite wrestler of 2022.
Hmm. Hmm. Ugh, there's a lot. I feel like this year it has to be Liv Morgan. She in the beginning of the year, she late last year she had gone battling Becky Lynch. She had an impressive showing in the Rumble. Her and Bianca were the dark horses. They're the Iron Women in that matchup. They had the longest time in the Rumble. She kind of fell off a little bit after that, but then she got the momentum up when she
Mm.
won Money in the Bank, and throughout the year she's been a fan favorite. She got to be on Chucky. She finally won gold in WWE, cashing in on Ronda. That was definitely a big pop too. And so Liv Morgan, I think, is just like very beloved and definitely has risen up in my ranks too. I literally have a whole big poster of her. So Liv Morgan, I would say.
This is the thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. You don't have to go get it now. But this is the thing that you showed on the spotlight with Jeremy
Yes,
Lambert,
yes,
right?
it was.
Yeah.
Granted, I've had this for about a year and a half, 2 years now. So like far before any of this has happened, I've had this for about 2 years now. But yeah, it literally sits in the corner of my room.
Yeah, fair enough. And as we look at wrapping this up, Ella, the last question, well, the last couple of questions I want to wrap this up on is, do you view your full-time transition to wrestling media as a success so far?
So far, yes, because I've already noticed like some small things, Now I feel like I've gotten to a point where, I may not be the biggest person in wrestling media by any means, but I think I've definitely grabs more people's eyes or attention to where now people are reaching out to me to work with them to make more podcast appearances. Or in the last couple of weeks, I've had a couple wrestlers DM me themselves wanting to work with me and be interviewed by me. So I think that alone has proven kind of the work ethic and the work that I put in the last couple of years has actually gotten some attention, and I've built maybe a good reputation for myself, that my work actually matters and means something. So even just little things like that, like it sounds so maybe weird, but to have wrestlers or to have people come to you with opportunities or want to be on your platform, I think is so validating that all the sacrifices that I've made in the last 3.5 years are, actually somewhat worth it at this point.
I think, to be honest, that's a beautiful way to end this conversation. But before we do, the question I end all my interviews on is, with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, we're sort of going to live forever in some sort of very weird way. So, what is one piece of content since your full time move over that you want the good people to check out? And then what is one that you're like, if I could go back, having had a bit of experience in full time media and do that differently, I would now.
So granted, again, at the time of recording this, I've only been full-time for a month now.
Yes, yeah.
Um something that I'm like really proud of. I'm just, man, I've done so many interviews even in just the last month. For me, I feel like interviewing is, like I said, like writing is like 75% of what I'm doing now full time in my schedule. Like, no, it's basically not 75%. It's like 80% of the stuff I'm doing now.
Say
I will say,
85 based on my 12.
yeah. Yeah. I will say though, like I do enjoy interviewing the most. That is the thing that I have the most passion for and most motivation for, and the thing that I love doing the most. So I think just interviewing in general, I've been interviewing so many great women in wrestling, like Viva Van, Billy Starks. I just spoke with Lady Frost today, Mariah May, like across all different platforms, like per week. I literally do interviews across what my podcast, WrestleZone, SE Scoops, Capital Championship across 5 different platforms, right? I'm able to do interviews.
Wow.
So I think that just in general is something that I'm proud of. Like I've been able to spread my love for women. Yeah, women in wrestling is basically my brand. You know, it's not my total identity, but it's something I'm super passionate about. So to be able to kind of spread that across 5 different platforms, I think has been super rewarding. And I'm appreciative that all the people allow me to do it.
And to be honest, I think that's a beautiful way to end this conversation. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash, and I will see you in the next one. And goodbye now.